Hey everyone, I'm Krish Chopra and I'm here today with Shelby Green. And I'm super excited to bring together our new podcast where we talk about financial health. It's a conversation a lot of NPs have had, especially ones that have graduated school, they are in some student debt, and now they're thinking, wow, my income has gone up, but what do I do now? Right? How do I save up for retirement? What does it mean to be financially free? To work towards a financial future where their children are also taken care of. So Shelby and I connected at the Unity Conference, the second annual, shout out to the UAPRN. And right off the bat, it was, hey, there's a ton of amazing content here. We both love to talk, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Shelby, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. Shelby, I know today's topic is super important. I want to dive right into it. And it's a lot about what is financial health, period, like question mark, right? Like, what does that mean? So why don't we start off with kind of going through your background a little bit and then hitting us with what does financial health mean?
Sure. Let's start with the background because I think that's a really important piece. So brief history about my background is I grew up in poverty, right? So financial health is definitely not what I had growing up. We were very financially ill. Not only were we living paycheck to paycheck, but both my parents now are currently going back to work in their 70s. If anything happens to them, they don't have the proper insurance plans either to make sure that those are covered. So, if they go to a retirement home, they're going to have to pay out of pocket. They don't have health insurance. So if they get, cancer or something like that, God forbid, they're going to have a lot of expenses coming out that I'm probably going to have to help with. And so that's kind of a little brief history on my background. Financial health itself, in my opinion, these are my terms. I'm thinking that it's the idea of what people call financial freedom or financial security. So making sure you have the proper defense in place so nothing can actually harm you financially. But then at the same time, making sure you have an offense so that way you make sure you have enough money to fund the future, right? It could be your future goals. It could be retirement. Whatever it may be, that person would have it, kind of like a sports team. That's why I like to say defense and offense, right? So you can have the best sports team in the world offensively, but if the other team just keeps scoring, you might eventually lose because you don't have any defense.
and you see, like before we started recording, we were talking about offense and defense. And for like myself, right, I consider myself, a fairly financially literate person. I've spent a lot of time in my early 20s working on that, kind of reinventing sort of like financial limiting beliefs, that I've had, saving towards retirement, saving and all those things. And I know it's so important to have like an emergency fund, right? Like you need to have 3 to 6 months, depending on your personality, ready in case you lose your job. But when we talked, you said that was like more like an offense. And your defense was just like it kind of blew my mind. What do you mean by defense?
Sure. So defense is a few different things. I think the emergency fund piece could also be used defensively, right? Because obviously the money's sitting there for emergencies at the end of the day. But what about normal life occurrences that could happen, period, right? So we don't think about things like, what if I'm in a car accident, right? Now I have a car accident. I have to pay out whatever it is from the car accident. And usually that's going to be covered with insurance, right? And so even making sure, and I don't even handle this stuff, but even car insurance, that kind of thing could be important because I drive around Buckhead daily. I'm in Atlanta and there's Lexuses, BMWs, Audis, and most people are riding around with bare minimum, not liability insurance, but they don't have enough liability. They can have full coverage, but that just covers their vehicle, not the one that they might hit, right? And so if you have $25,000 of coverage and you hit a $75,000 car, you still owe them 50 grand. So it's just things that people don't think about. Also, one of the biggest things, especially for nurse and nurse practitioners, they're the top three out of every industry period for claims for disability insurance. And at work, the max disability insurance they'll ever get is 60% of their income. So if they get hurt, sick, it could be anxiety, depression, having a baby. If they're out of work for 6 months, that's a lot of income gone where they can get that covered outside of work and not be dependent on their employer. Right.
Wow. So disability. So, and something I'm first of all, I never have thought about disability insurance that way. So you're saying that nurses and nurse practitioners, so of the top 3, they're in the top 3, they segmented out. Okay. And when you say disability, you mean that like, so they can't work and then their income, say you have an NP, they're making 100, let's use 100 grand for easy math.
Yeah.
They lose, like they only make 60,000 on disability. And how long does that last?
With their employer, usually 2 to 5 years max. And that's the thing is, I never tell people, the statistics are that 1 in 3 nurses are going to have a claim. 1 in 3. So if it's that high for claim reasons, then I would say I don't want to be that one person who ends up, having only 60% of my income, right? And so that just covers the short term, right? There's also now, what if I actually get injured or sick long term? I'm only going to have income for 2 to 5 years. What about the other 30 years that I'm alive? Right? You get it outside of work, it's covered till you're age 65. At least worst case scenario, I have income my whole entire lifetime coming in no matter what, right? Especially where I have NPs who own their own practices. They get no employer benefits.
Yeah.
So they get $0 if anything happens to them, whereas they can get their income just covered supplementally outside of their own work. Business owners or the like is exactly the same. And so making sure that that's there, and that just covers income, right? I think income is the most important asset that we ever can have. Way more than our houses, our cars, our toys. Income.
It's interesting you mentioned that with income, because a lot of times you hear NPs, and not even NPs, just any professional, right? Anyone who's getting towards 30, 35, 40, they're doing well financially, and they're like, oh man, I need to get an asset. I need to get a car. Or I'm sorry, I need to get a house, or I need to start investing in the market. But then you bring up the conversation of, hey, maybe you need to negotiate your salary. Maybe you've been making 100K for the last 3 years, and you get a 2.5 salary bump every year, 2.5%, and it doesn't do anything for you because inflation knocks that out. So tell me a little bit more about like when you say your best asset is your income. Why is that a better asset than anything else?
Your ability to earn income is your biggest asset. The reasons why is because, let's just say the NP who's making $100,000, right? Now, bearing out things like expenses and taxes, in 5 years, that in theory, that's $500,000, right? Bearing out taxes and expenses.
Yeah.
Right. So that is their future worth. Now, they're not going to be working for 5 years usually. They're going to be working for 20. Mm-hmm. Right. That's now $2 million of money that they will be earning over the course of the next 20 years, bearing out taxes and expenses. Right.
Right.
Now, when you take into consideration things like a car, let's say you have a Toyota Camry. I'm not sure what they cost exactly, maybe $25,000. Mm-hmm. That might be an asset that I have. I feel like it's an asset. It could even be paid off. But at the end of the day, that asset, 1, is going to depreciate, and 2, is only worth $25,000. And no matter how long in the future I wait, it's never going to be worth more than that income that I would have had coming in, right? A house is an appreciating asset, so that might be a little bit different, right? But if I buy a $200,000 house, income-wise, my ability to earn $200,000 is in 2 years, and that house is never going to, within 20 years, end up at $2 million. Just quite frankly, it will not be at $2 million. And so their ability to earn money is actually what's going to keep things going, because it keeps everything in motion, right? Because you get income every single month. And as long as you keep getting income, it improves your ability to fund anything. That house, that car, your bills, your kids. Without the ability to earn money and without your income, it really affects everything financially, even things like you wouldn't think of. It affects your retirement, because now you put less money towards retirement. Now you put less money towards savings, less money towards your kids' education, if that's important to you. Now there's less money to pay off your student loans.
Right.
And so it affects everything.
So if we had to sum it up, you're saying that it's not enough just to have disability insurance. There's something else to help you kind of, you said 60%, right? So like how do you get that 40% difference?
So you can actually have your own income protection policy. You'd have to talk to a professional. Right. And so obviously people who are licensed to provide those type of policies to people, they're able to actually do that. And so like group policies, for example, I do a lot of group policies at different employments, and that's exactly how they are. They're 50, 60% of your income. But then that same exact person has to contact me again outside of work. And then we go ahead and say, okay, should we get some supplemental income protection in place? That way your paycheck is protected. Like, I'm not even talking about like life insurance if you die right now or any of the other type of things. I'm talking about how about we protect your paycheck?
Got it. Okay. And that's supplemental care you need to like start looking into.
Correct.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's more on the defense side, right? What
Yep.
else do you need? Let's assume you kind of like. Do you recommend having a proper defense in place and then offense, or do you recommend going at it together?
I always recommend going at them together. If someone absolutely mandatorily had to pick between one or the other, I would say defense, because at least nothing will go down. Your assets won't go down if you have a good defensive plan, right?
That makes sense.
And so at the end of the day, you don't want anything to decrease. Always want to, if you want to stay the same, I mean, that's not obviously the most ideal place to be. You want to go up, but staying the
Right.
same, being stagnant is better than decreasing. And so I would say do them both at the same time. Make sure you're protected, but also make sure you're growing at the same time. But if you had to pick one or the other, I would definitely pick defense first,
Got it.
then the offensive piece.
Okay, so let's talk more about some of that like basics on setting up a proper offense and defense, right? Let's talk. Let's kind of like put in a sample together, and let's take an NP out of school.
Okay.
Let's take she is graduating. Maybe she's about 30 years old. Um, Maybe she has 30K in student loans, and she has a job coming out making 90K.
Good.
Okay. And then right before we get into like how would you recommend starting out with this person, let's outline what do you mean when you say asset, and also what do you mean when you say liability? I'm
Sure.
sure these names will come up.
Yeah. So I just want to, kind of make it very clear that an asset is something that you own, right? So my name is Shelby. I own blank. That is going to be your assets. Your assets are things that you own. They have a value next to them, right?
Mm.
And so even this laptop might be a small asset, and I'm currently on a call with you on a laptop,
Right.
and so this is an asset that I own. If I owned a house, for example, and my house was paid off, it's an asset.
Right.
Now, when people talk about liabilities, these are usually things that you don't technically own, even though you might have, right? So I want to give some examples, right? If I have a car, but the car has a loan, I technically don't own that. The bank owns it.
Got
It is
it.
now a liability, right? It's something that I have to make payments on. I'm probably also going to pay an interest on. I don't actually own that. I actually want to say for most people, there's a confusion between is a house an asset or liability. Most people would say it's an asset. Just like me, also I would quote Robert Kiyosaki in this, is that unless your house is paid off, it's still liability.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think Robert Kiyosaki is the one that also says that if it takes money out of your pocket, it's a liability.
Exactly.
If it puts money in your pocket, it's an asset.
Exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
100%. I was wondering if you're going to quote Rich Dad Poor Dad. And for anyone listening in, I think any savvy investor would probably cite that as a top 5 book to read, at least once.
It's funny. You mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad because I, especially my clients, we always 100% of the time, not 99, not 95. We actually go by a lot of the Rich Dad Poor Dad principles and fundamentals. We take the Rich Dad approach to paying ourselves first all the time before doing what the Poor Dad did. And so I love that book. It's a personal favorite. I have probably over 10 copies.
Fair,
I love
fair.
putting it out as gifts. It's like, as for what I do, financial professional, I think that giving the gift of financial wisdom is probably one of the biggest gifts that I could give to anybody. Way more valuable than a 25 gift card to a restaurant.
No,
right?
you're right.
I give,
Like,
I give a book that's worth thousands of dollars.
100%, right? And okay, so you said something really interesting just now, and it's like we glossed over it so quickly.
Yep.
Paying yourself first.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Sure. So the idea of paying yourself first is, for example, me, right? I'll give my own personal example. To me, nobody's more important to me than me. So to Shelby, nobody's more important than Shelby to Shelby. That's just kind of how it is. To Krish, nobody's more important to Krish than Krish. And so I should be the first person that receives my own paycheck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, I should be the first person that receives my own paycheck. And so I want to pay myself first, putting it towards my own future goals, whatever it is. It could be anything. Right. It could be retirement. It could be investing. It could be self-care. It could be my bank account, whatever it is. I'm paying myself first. Then obviously I'm not going to go and try and be homeless or anything of the sort. I'm going to make sure I pay my bills and expenses, right? I got to keep the lights on. I got to keep the water running. I'm going to pay my bills and expenses. Whatever money is left over, that's up to you. Now, personally, what's left over for me is fun money. I'm going to spend it. I've already adulted for the month, and I believe that I'm actually still relatively young, right? I think that as these NPs are graduating, they need to remember that it is okay to spend a little bit of money on yourself. That's the purpose of money, right? At the end of the day,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
it's
Like I agree.
yeah,
And it's interesting, right? Like when people say paying yourself first, they're like, wait, no, the money goes in my bank account. Of course I pay myself first. But it's a concept of you don't put your your savings come first. They don't come last. You don't spend and then save what's left over at the end of the month. You allocate in the beginning.
exactly, and that's huge. You hit on because that's what happens usually. Because plenty of my clients, this is usually the route they take. They might go from LPN, so RN to NP.
Mm.
Their income has now shot from $40,000 to 90 to 100 or so and so forth, right?
Yep.
But all that happens is their lifestyle continues to go up very, very little increments, and to the point where they're actually living exactly the same. They're still living in theory paycheck to paycheck, a lot of them,
Right.
because they're spending more money without even
Mm.
noticing it. Because what they're doing is they're paying their bills, expenses, doing all that first, and they're trying to save over what's left at the end of the month. You had 2 paychecks. The paycheck is gone by the end of the month. That's it.
Yeah.
You've already had the chance to save it, to do X, Y, and Z with it, and the money's no longer there. That's what most people are experiencing. So they feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck, but they're making $90,000 a year, and their bills are only $30,000 a year. There's a disconnect there
Yeah.
every single time. It's like, where's my money going? That's something that I actually just wrote a blog about too. Is that the money's all going to little $20 things. That's it. Right? Most nurse practitioners that I know, they're not necessarily going out buying $1 million houses or $10,000 Rolexes or $10,000 dresses or red bottom shoes or anything like that, right?
Right. Right.
What they are doing is they're buying maybe a glass of wine at dinner. Maybe they're going out a little more than usual. Maybe they're buying their kids something. Maybe they're splurging a little bit too much here and there, things that cost 20, 30 bucks.
Got it.
If I'm spending $20, let's say one day, every day, discretionarily, that's $600 a month. I'm using on something that only costs $20.
And you have
That's
to ask, yeah, it is. And you have to ask yourself, if you don't remember where you spend your money, is it worth it?
Right.
Interesting. All right, man. We probably need to wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes, and we have to hit on an offense.
Sure.
Right. So you talked about your defense, right? We want to have, we talked a little bit about having the savings, and then now you're also saying, hey, you want to make sure you have protection towards your income. It's the most important asset you have. On the offense side, you have that NP. She's 30. She just graduated. She makes $90K. Yep. What does she do?
Sure. So there's no one size fits all for anybody, but the first thing that they should do is they need to make sure that first thing first, if their employer offers a 401k or 403b contribution in a match, they need to make sure they are putting money into that at least up to the match, right? Because if I'm getting a 4% match at an employer, I want the free money. That's free money. They're just giving you money because of the fact that you're even contributing. Do that. It's the first thing every time. 100% of them should be doing that easily. So that's the first step. Now, what I've realized is the average nurse I'm talking to who's going on the verge of retiring, on the high end, they have really sitting in that account about $600,000 if they've been a nurse for 30, 35 years or so. So $600,000 built is only 10 years of their income. And that's if they're making just 60 grand, right?
Right.
So that's not going to last them 20, 30 years in retirement. So that means they also need retirement outside of their 401k, right? So they need to also see a professional or get into some sort of offensive plan to where they can also put money aside that's not just reliant on that employer 401k, especially because they may not be working for an employer that gives a 401k match their whole life.
Right. That's
right. A lot of them are 1099 contractors. And so a lot of them, they will never be at a point where they can consistently get that match. They won't. And if they are, it's still not enough money. They need to get something outside. Now, I can't necessarily say what's necessarily best for a specific individual. But what I can say is a lot of different accounts, they will offer a pretty decent return to where you now have multiple pieces of your portfolio that are going to help you retire later on.
Got it. Okay. So when you say a portfolio, right? I know, like you and I know that 401k falls in part of your portfolio. What else could be included in one?
Sure. So there's numbers of things. I'm just going to name a few of them, and I'm not telling you which one's the best one or necessarily, but
Mhm.
there's a few ones that are quite common, right? And then I'll get very briefly into an offensive strategy, because a strategy is more important than a growth number, right? Because people,
Mhm.
especially professionals, they'll spit out numbers, 8%, 9% growth, so on and so forth. Those numbers mean nothing to somebody who doesn't really understand what that means.
Right.
What matters is the strategy you have behind that. What you grow doesn't matter. It's what you keep the day that you retire. It's all people care about, right? How much money do I have?
Yeah.
Uh, some very popular accounts are IRAs. I just happen to prefer, for nurse practitioners, if I were to do an IRA, there's a Roth IRA and there's a more traditional plan, right? So the Roth IRA basically takes your after-tax dollars and puts it into an account that's going to grow tax deferred, right? Now the benefit of that, one is you've already paid taxes on that money today. And if anybody knows anything about taxes, this is the lowest tax rate we've ever had in history today. And so, me personally, I would rather pay taxes now, and then I put money into my tax deferred vehicle, and then later on, I take the money out. That's simple, right? You could also put pre tax dollars in, which means that you don't pay taxes today. But when you take the money out, you're now going to have to pay taxes at whatever the tax rate ends up being in 40 years from now or 30 years from now when you retire, right? And so those are some accounts. There's also things, obviously, people know there's things like mutual funds. There's other things out there as well for people. There's fixed income. And so places you can put money that's relatively safe. So when I'm talking to people about strategies, my strategy for everybody is always, okay, you should have some money that's put away somewhere that can have unlimited earning potential,
Mm.
right? So something that will give you all that high growth, but you should also have a floor built in your retirement to where at least your base expenses are covered, right? I know that I have a floor big enough built into my retirement, no matter what's happening, down markets in retirement, or if the stock market crashes, I know minimum, I at least have this floor put somewhere safe. Maybe it's growing between 3 and 5%, 6% growth. So a little more conservative, but at least I have my money put somewhere safe that's going to cover my expenses. That's a strategy. Strategies are more important than anything else, right? And so those are some of my favorite strategies personally.
Mm.
Every single person is different at the end of the day, right? Because they have different risk tolerance levels. Some people have different incomes, different debts. And so when it comes to offense, having a strategy is the most important thing. And you cannot rely just on that employer 401k, 403b.
Got it. So the 401k is not enough.
It is not enough.
All right.
100% of the time.
Interesting, man. No, I love it. And you see, you touched on something just now that I know if you scoped out to talk about it at our next conversation, we all have different types of debt. And good debt, bad debt, student loan, good debt, bad debt. Is it worth it to go into, we know some RNs that they're hesitant to get their degree because they're like, well, I don't want to go 20, 30 grand in debt. And I'm really excited for that conversation next week.
Oh yeah. We're going to talk a lot about the debts, especially one that hits right at home for NPs is student loans.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it hits for everyone, man. Like at this point, like the cost of school is intense. All right,
Yep.
Shelby, tell everyone how do they find you? Do they go to your website? They hit you up on social? Where are you?
Sure. So I'm on obviously multiple different platforms, and so I'll kind of go through each one. So obviously my website is sagfinancialgroup.com. That is the name of the company. So SAG, that's S is in Shelby, A is in Apple, G is in Green, financialgroup.com. From there, they can see information on the company. They can also book a consultation. It's no charge to nurses, nurse practitioners, CRNAs, PAs, etc. And so they can do that pretty easily. They can also leave a message. They can email me all that information. My email is Shelby Green, my first and last name, at sagfinancialgroup.com.
Awesome.
They can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Shelby Green. Once again,
I'm sensing the theme. Yeah, for sure.
Comma Wealth is Health. That's my tagline.
Okay.
So Shelby Green, comma Wealth is Health. On Instagram, it's SAG_Wealth is Health.
Cool.
Same thing. Facebook is Shelby Green, comma Wealth is Health.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Very cool. All right, man. You take it easy. I'll see you next week.
All right, Krish, have a good one.
Bye.